a separate 37-count indictment against Trump in July over his retention of classified documents. In March, Trump was indicted in New York over allegations he falsified business records related to a hush money payment to porn star Stormy Daniels. He has pleaded not guilty in both of those cases and has sought to portray the multiple prosecutions against him as part of a politically motivated witch hunt. Meanwhile, Trump faces a fourth criminal investigation by a county prosecutor in Georgia into accusations he sought to undo his 2020 election loss in that state. Trump was ordered to make an initial appearance in federal court in Washington over the special counsel's latest indictment on Thursday.
Right, so the latest update we're getting, ladies and gentlemen, is that the judge has entered the Washington courtroom and Trump's arraignment is about to begin anytime. Let's remember, Trump is expected to plead not guilty. He has been charged with 4 counts: conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of an attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, conspiracy against rights. Now, special counsel Jack Smith, who you just heard a short while back, is present in the courtroom for former President Donald Trump's first appearance in the election subversion case. Smith also attended Trump's first appearance in the case the special prosecutor brought against the former president for allegedly mishandling classified documents. So you remember the classified documents case? Jack Smith was the special prosecutor, the special counsel who led that charge as well. Trump is currently inside the courtroom for the initial appearance, and what we are learning is that the judge has entered the courtroom. Trump's arraignment has begun, but this has divided the political base in America, ladies and gentlemen, because the Republicans, majority of them, still feel that this is a witch hunt against Donald Trump. The MAGA base continues to surround itself with Trump mania, ladies and gentlemen, claiming that Joe Biden has weaponized the Justice Department and targeted Donald Trump because Joe Biden is afraid of Trump's popularity given the 2024 presidential elections. That is the pitch that's coming in, and at the same time, many of the people in the Republican camp, many of the moderates in the Republican camp, including the contenders who are fighting against Donald Trump for the Republican ticket, they are still reluctant and squeamish about taking him on. It seems that the Republican contenders are fighting for who will be the vice president under Donald Trump. But within Congress, within the fight between the Democrats and the Republicans, the battle lines have been drawn. Let's listen in to the top voices coming in from the U.S. Congress.
I don't think it's surprising. I think the committee laid out, and you'll remember this, Scott, we said time and time again, our focus was to seek the truth and to make sure that there's accountability. We also said very clearly that there were some tools that could be utilized only by the Department of Justice that were not available to us in our select committee. So we're appreciative of the work of the Department of Justice and their focus on staying true to finding the facts and holding people accountable. Their track record has been very solid when it comes to prosecutions, and we expect that the target letter and the work that the grand jury continues to do will meet that threshold of seeking the facts and holding people accountable, no matter where they are and no matter who they are.
The American people are going to be furious. And what Jack Smith is doing is the weaponized government. And he's weaponizing the Department of Justice against President Trump in a complete lie about President Trump and January 6th. And it's outrageous. I can't believe our country has to endure this. And I'll be standing with President Trump the entire way. The question that I want to ask Jack Smith, is this the plan? Are they going to arrest President Trump, charge him with phony, fake charges, and then hold him in prison while he is winning the Republican primary, while he's going to win the general election in 2024? Is this where our country is now? Because it's an embarrassment on the world stage. If this is the direction America is going in, we are worse than Russia. We are worse than China. We are worse than some of the most corrupt third world countries, and this needs to end. It's an absolute lie, and every single time President Trump is proven innocent time and time and time again, and he'll be proven innocent again. He shouldn't have a trial related to the last indictment. This is ridiculous. The document hoax is nothing but a hoax. And now they're going to try to charge him with some kind of seditious conspiracy on January 6th. It's ridiculous. Saying march peacefully, go in peace to the Capitol, how is that seditious conspiracy? It's not. And there's nothing wrong with asking questions about elections. That is exactly what we should do. We should make sure that our elections are safe. We should make sure that we have election integrity. There's nothing wrong with saying, look into this. Was there election fraud?
And that is the distorted narrative that is coming in from the Republican camp, ladies and gentlemen, because Donald Trump didn't raise questions against the elections when he lost to Joe Biden. He said that they were rigged. We also remember what he did in Georgia, where he called up the Secretary of State and said, find me more votes so that I can claim the state and I can give a fight to Joe Biden. This is clear election interference, but the Republican Party, especially the MAGA supporters, are trying to switch the narrative, saying that all he was doing was raising questions about election integrity. Remember, majority of Republican lawmakers did not certify the elections. Remember, Donald Trump also incited that mob to storm the US Capitol, and they all said hang Mike Pence because Pence refused to do Donald Trump's bidding. So that is the political rigmarole surrounding Donald Trump. But at the end of the day, ladies and gentlemen, he continues to be the front runner for the US, for the Republican presidential ticket ahead of the 2024 presidential elections. Donald Trump continues to be far ahead of other contenders. The MAGA base continues to rally around him. But currently what we are learning is that he is inside the courtroom in Washington, D.C. The judge has entered the courtroom and Trump's arraignment has just begun. He is in custody in the D.C. courthouse for charges in the 2020 election interference case. Now he is expected to plead not guilty. He has been charged with 4 counts: conspiracy to defraud the United States, conspiracy to obstruct an official proceeding, obstruction of and attempt to obstruct an official proceeding, and conspiracy against rights. So those are the charges that he is facing. But Trump has said, I may be facing the legal heat because of the weaponization of the Justice Department, but if I get indicted another time, if these charges continue, then my stock is only going up. The 2024 presidential elections will be swept by me. I will be victorious. And Trump has been saying that on the campaign trail, touting his achievements, his so-called achievements when he was president, also hitting out at his critics as well as the Biden government, saying that it is the radical left that is after me and my supporters. Listen in.
Of course, remains a vital role for the federal government in protecting unborn life. And it's very important. And I propose for you tonight, just as I did when I said that we will win the Supreme Court decision on abortion. Remember, I said that during my campaign. Everyone said, that's not going to happen. Nobody thought that was going to happen. But I will fight for you like no president has ever fought before. We'll get something done for the country. But I believe the greatest progress for pro-life is now being made in the states where everyone wanted to be. That's one of the reasons they wanted Roe v. Wade terminated, is to bring it back into the states where a lot of people feel strongly it should be, and where legal scholars feel very strongly it should be, with the 3 exceptions that I support and Ronald Reagan before me supported for rape, incest, and for the life of the mother. A lot of people are more and more coming into that fold, and it's something you have to very consider. You have to go with your heart. We will defeat the radical Democrat policy of extreme late-term abortion, and we will bring everybody together to protect our precious unborn babies in a very, very big way. And now you have the power to do it because we terminated Roe v. Wade. But I got it done, and nobody thought it was even a possibility. They've been fighting. Good people, strong people, smart people have been fighting for 50 years, and it never even came close to getting done. I don't believe they've ever even taken a vote. I mean, never even came close. It was something that wasn't going to happen. I got it done. From my first day in office, I took historic action to protect the unborn. Very historic. Nobody else did anything near what we did. And it put us in such a great position, that victory. That victory, we'll go into it, but that victory is a tremendous victory in so many different ways, because they are the radical people. When they're willing to kill a child after birth, they're willing, take it beyond the 9 months. They are the radical people. They are the people that are really in trouble with the Lord. These incredible poll numbers are one of the main reasons the Marxist left is weaponizing the criminal justice system to try and stop us. If I wasn't running, or if I was doing badly in the polls, all of this investigation bullshit would stop immediately. Stop immediately. And I did nothing wrong. It's under the Presidential Records Act. I did nothing wrong. Biden has doubled the CAFE standards, costing automakers an estimated $200 billion, and that number is going up, and sending car prices skyrocketing and killing thousands and thousands of U.S. auto jobs, in addition to which you can't produce because you can't get the chips, and you can't have, your supply chain is a disaster. The whole country is a mess. Biden is a catastrophe for Michigan, and his environmental extremism is heartless and disloyal and horrible for the American worker, and you're starting to see it. We are a nation in decline, and now these radical left lunatics want to interfere with our elections by using law enforcement.
Hello and welcome to News 18 Global with me, Ayushman Singh Jamwal. Our top story as we continue to track former US President Donald Trump, who has been indicted for a third time. He has arrived at Newark Airport to depart for Washington, D.C., where he will be appearing before a federal judge for his arraignment. Trump has been indicted for the third time and is charged with plotting to overturn his 2020 election defeat at the hands of Joe Biden. Donald Trump has been charged with 4 counts, including conspiracy to defraud the United States, tampering with witnesses, and conspiracy against the rights of citizens. Now, each of the 4 charges against Trump are punishable with prison time. The indictment also caps an inquiry into events surrounding the January 6th U.S. Capitol riots. Remember, Trump has already been indicted by a Manhattan grand jury in March for business fraud in connection with hush money payments made to adult entertainer Stormy Daniels. He was indicted in connection with the classified documents probe in June as well. Now, this spells even more trouble for the Republican frontrunner ahead of the 2024 presidential elections. Trump currently faces 78 criminal counts in 3 different cases. Now, as Trump campaigns for the 2024 U.S. presidential elections, he carries the weight of 3 criminal trials over the next 12 to 18 months.
I want the American people to know that I had no right to overturn the election. And then on that day, President Trump asked me to put him over the Constitution. But I chose the Constitution, and I always will. I mean, I really do believe that anyone who puts himself over the Constitution should never be President of the United States. And anyone who asks someone else to put themselves over the Constitution should never be President of the United States again. Now, with regard to the substance of the indictment, I've been very clear. I had hoped it wouldn't come to this. I had hoped that this issue and the judgment of the president's actions that day would be left to the American people.
I don't think it's surprising. I think the committee laid out, and you'll remember this, Scott, we said time and time again, our focus was to seek the truth and to make sure that there's accountability. We also said very clearly that there were some tools that could be utilized only by the Department of Justice that were not available to us in our select committee. So we're appreciative of the work of the Department of Justice and their focus on staying true to finding the facts and holding people accountable. Their track record has been very solid when it comes to prosecutions, and we expect that the target letter and the work that the grand jury continues to do will meet that threshold of seeking the facts and holding people accountable, no matter where they are and no matter who they are.
The American people are going to be furious. And what Jack Smith is doing is the weaponized government. And he's weaponizing the Department of Justice against President Trump in a complete lie about President Trump and January 6th. And it's outrageous. I can't believe our country has to endure this. And I'll be standing with President Trump the entire way. The question that I want to ask Jack Smith, is this the plan? Are they going to arrest President Trump, charge him with phony, fake charges, and then hold him in prison while he is winning the Republican primary, while he's going to win the general election in 2024? Is this where our country is now? Because it's an embarrassment on the world stage. If this is the direction America is going in, we are worse than Russia. We are worse than China. We are worse than some of the most corrupt third world countries, and this needs to end. It's an absolute lie, and every single time President Trump is proven innocent time and time and time again, and he'll be proven innocent again. He shouldn't have a trial related to the last indictment. This is ridiculous. The document hoax is nothing but a hoax, and now they're going to try to charge him with some kind of seditious conspiracy on January 6th. It's ridiculous. Saying march peacefully, go in peace to the Capitol, how is that seditious conspiracy? It's not. And there's nothing wrong with asking questions about elections. That is exactly what we should do. We should make sure that our elections are safe. We should make sure that we have election integrity. There's nothing wrong with saying, look into this. Was there election fraud?
There's stuff in here that I know is untrue. I'm deeply disappointed. I thought I was dealing with professionals, and I am so disappointed. This Trump derangement syndrome takes away your ability to reason, and it takes away your ability to be honest. It's an illness. What they did here is an abomination that will live in history as one of the worst violations of free speech ever in the history of a country that used to value free speech more than any country on earth. We can't say that anymore.
U.S. Special Counsel Jack Smith announced the third indictment against Donald Trump in 4 months on Tuesday, this time arising from the former president's efforts to overturn his 2020 election defeat, which Smith said fueled the January 6th assault on the U.S. Capitol.
The attack on our nation's capital on January 6th, 2021, was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. The men and women of law enforcement who defended the U.S. Capitol on January 6th are heroes. They are patriots, and they are the very best of us. They did not just defend a building or the people sheltering in it. They put their lives on the line to defend who we are as a country and as a people.
The 4-count indictment alleges Trump conspired to defraud the United States by preventing Congress from certifying President Joe Biden's victory and to deprive voters of their right to a fair election.
You don't concede when there's theft involved.
Prosecutors wrote that Trump knew his claims that the election was stolen were false, but repeated them anyway to, quote, create an intense national atmosphere of mistrust and anger and erode public faith in the administration of the election. Meanwhile, Trump leads a crowded field of Republican candidates as he campaigns to regain the presidency in 2024. In a statement, the Trump campaign said he has always followed the law and characterized the indictment as a political persecution reminiscent of Nazi Germany.
Our investigation of other individuals continues.
The grand jury indictment also alleges Trump conspired with 6 other individuals to overturn the 2020 election results. The co-conspirators were not named, but one of them appeared to describe former Justice Department official Jeffrey Clark, the former head of the Civil Division who tried to get himself installed as Attorney General so he could launch voter fraud investigations in Georgia and other swing states. Another alleged co-conspirator appeared to describe Attorney John Eastman, who erroneously suggested that Vice President Mike Pence could object to certifying the election results. It all adds to the growing pile of legal woes Trump faces. Tuesday's indictment represented a second round of federal charges by Smith, who announced a separate 37-count indictment against Trump in July over his retention of classified documents. In March, Trump was indicted in New York over allegations he falsified business records related to a hush money payment to porn star Stormy Daniels. He has pleaded not guilty in both of those cases and has sought to portray the multiple prosecutions against him as part of a politically motivated witch hunt. Meanwhile, Trump faces a fourth criminal investigation by a county prosecutor in Georgia into accusations he sought to undo his 2020 election loss in that state. Trump was ordered to make an initial appearance in federal court in Washington over the special counsel's latest indictment on Thursday.
How do you feel? Three indictments?
We're not happy, but we know it's all fake. We know it's all fake. We know it's all made up. We know it's political. So that's what everybody knows. We're here to support Donald Trump. Show our support, our love for our man.
I'm hoping happens today. Hopefully, he is going to get locked up, but that's just the fingerprints and everything. But he's not doing overnight like I did when I got locked up in Miami. He should do a lot of overnights. He needs to, because he's gotten away with a lot of stuff, man. And his lies, enough is enough. Let's call a spade a spade. The guy is a bullshit artist. Enough is enough. This is America. You can't get away with the shit he's gotten away with.
Every time I get a subpoena, my polls go up, I get more and more subpoenas. Report to a grand jury. He's killing Biden. He's killing them all. That's what it is. These are crooked people. Never happened in our country called weaponization of the Department of Justice and the FBI. We've never had anything like this. And it's all bullshit, too. It's all stuff.
And I'm joined by Ray Locker, author and journalist, Stephen Golub, international affairs expert, and Sanjay Suri, who's joining us all the way from London when it comes to the entire dynamics surrounding Donald Trump's indictment. Ray Locker, I'll come to you first. We just heard what Donald Trump just said about his indictment. The more he gets attacked by the Justice Department, the more his poll numbers go up. Is that the reality of American politics as we see today?
Well, that's the reality of Republican primary politics. It's not necessarily the reality of general election politics. And I think most observers believe that this is not good news for Trump in a general election. I mean, keep in mind, this is someone who has not won the majority of votes in the two presidential elections he's contested, 2016 and 2020. He's never gotten 50% of the vote. He never has polled more than 50% public support from the time he was elected in 2016 until the time he left office in 2021. So he can say whatever he wants, but the facts indicate otherwise.
Right, but at the same time, and I'll take that question to you, Mr. Stephen Golub, when it comes to the Republican base at the end of the day, you see that none of Trump's contenders for the Republican ticket are taking him on, in a very direct manner. They're very squeamish about targeting Trump because they don't want to anger the MAGA base. So at the end of the day, looking at the numbers where he's far ahead of the competition for the Republican ticket, are the Republicans once again, just from the general election point of view, digging their own grave again?
Well, I believe that actually Republican leaders are, to a limited extent, including at least a few of the people contending for the presidential nomination, are taking him on now. It's true that there's been craven conduct by most Republican leaders for years regarding Donald Trump's own conduct, his illegal and unethical activities. The way they've enabled him has been really shameful. But you had former Vice President Mike Pence saying in a TV interview just yesterday that Donald Trump tried to make him overturn the election. You've had former Governor Chris Christie, who's also running for the Republican nomination, going after Donald Trump quite vociferously, pointing out the wrongs he's done, the illegal acts he's committed, that he does merit prosecution. And in fact, the indictment of Donald Trump, to get back to Vice President Pence for a moment, points out that Vice President Pence is himself a source of information, a source of evidence about Donald Trump's arguably illegal acts. So while I agree with your general point about the Republican leadership, we do now have a few Republican candidates who, even though they're way behind in the polls, are going after him, attacking him quite vehemently about the conduct, the actions that led to this indictment.
Right, but Stephen, I know you've been looking at the Trump presidency since 2016. You had that entire situation where you had people who worked for Trump, they backed him, and then, there was this factory kind of situation that they would leave, they would, resign from the Trump White House and then write a book about how he's an awful person. It was for almost every Trump official. So when it comes to Trump's orbit, and especially the Republicans who surround Trump, them changing their tune is a very matter of fact. They easily change their tune. Now, currently, Pence is attacking him. Just days after Trump supporters outside the US Capitol building were shouting, "Hang Mike Pence," he was saying, "Oh, I have great relations with Donald Trump." My point is, given his political clout, you can't deny the numbers currently when it comes to the Republican primaries. He is miles ahead of the competition. Currently, they're attacking him, thinking that there might be some space to challenge Trump. But the minute he secures those primary nominations, as we go from state to state to state, they will change their tune. They have done that before.
Well, there are 2 points here. One is in terms of the integrity of those who supported him and later turned against him. I would argue that even though Mike Pence supported Donald Trump throughout his presidency, it took a real act of courage and integrity for Mike Pence to say to Donald Trump on January 6th, no, you do not have the power. I, as vice president, do not have the power to overturn the election. That was not simply in Mike Pence's self-interest. More broadly, however, or on another point, I do agree that Donald Trump does have a commanding lead, and he is likely to secure the Republican nomination. Things could still change. A day or a week or a long time in politics, things could change, but it's still very likely that he'll win the Republican nomination. I agree with Ray's point, however, in that winning the Republican nomination, winning over the Republican base, is a far different matter from winning the general population and winning the general election, which I think will be more difficult, considerably more difficult for Donald Trump.
Right, but at the same time, we've always been waiting for that inflection point within the Republican base. When will they actually turn against Trump? When will they actually kind of distance themselves from the MAGA base? That still hasn't happened. We all thought it was endgame when that hot mic tape came out, when he said, "Grab them by the P word." Nothing happened. He still stormed ahead in the elections. That is the cult-like status he has in the Republican Party. Sanjay, when it comes to Donald Trump's status within the Republican Party, of course, when you look at his election track record, he's had a dismal election track record when it comes to taking on the Democrats, where not only did he lose the elections, but at the same time, he also lost the Senate seats in Georgia. You have so many red states which turned blue. But the Republican base still putting its faith in Trump, at least the MAGA base. The Republican moderates don't seem to have gathered that kind of momentum within Republican politics to take on Donald Trump. And that is only a problem for the Republican Party at the end of the day.
Well, that is the position so far. And we are still into early weeks of the second indictment now. We had a very serious indictment in the classified documents case, and that was in June. We now have this one coming up, and there's possibly another coming up later this month in relation to Georgia. So this is just about unfolding, but even through these early weeks, we are seeing an element of support for him falling away from people who erstwhile were his supporters. We are talking about some of the other candidates in the Republican race. Add to them Asa Hutchinson, add Hurd, and we are seeing a not very emphatically declared support even from Ron DeSantis. This is an indication, and of course with Mike Pence it's a different story. Mike Pence is almost going to be the prime prosecution witness now against Donald Trump. So we are beginning to see this fray. Of course, Trump does look at the moment invincible. In the latest poll, he is 37 percentage points ahead of DeSantis, which is a huge, huge margin. But of course, nobody can say with any certainty that this advantage will necessarily stay. History is full of the stories of leaders who thought they were invincible, who people thought were invincible, who then met their doom. So it's not necessary, it's not a given that this support for Trump will continue forever.
Right, but 37 points ahead of DeSantis, that is a huge deal at the end of the day. Let's not deny the numbers, guys. I mean, at the end of the day, we need to keep that in mind, that when it comes to this, the entire rigmarole inside the Republican Party, this man is still Teflon Don. I'm only talking about the numbers. I'm only talking about the support he commands within the Republican Party. Nothing seems to take him down, and no one on the other side is gathering the courage to take him on. Let's say they do. You look at Lynn Cheney also. What happened to her? She's become a pariah within the Republican Party. Anyone who takes on Donald Trump becomes a pariah in the Republican Party. You have the voices, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Matt Gaetz. They are the most vocal voices within the Republican Party. My only point is, when will that inflection point come? Ray Locker, in your opinion, as we head towards the 2024 presidential elections, he is still in a commanding position. Who in the Republican Party can rally the Republican moderates, let's say the Republican moderate base, and take him on when it comes to the primaries and actually put up a fight?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, the candidates out there now, first of all, there are too many of them. Trump benefits by having a very divided field. If somebody were able to coalesce significant opposition to him, behind one candidate, then and take Trump on 1-to-1, that would be different. That's tough because you have to show that you can raise a lot of money, that you're able to draw support from other people. And so far, no one has done that. That doesn't mean it's impossible. You look at an early caucus state like Iowa, a candidate who develops strength there and is able to either win or come close in the caucuses to Trump, that could be the first sign of weakness. Then you go to New Hampshire and we see what happens there. Maybe enough independents coalesce behind a candidate to beat Trump there. Could it be Chris Christie? Could it be somebody else? Hard to say. So those are all the factors that are at play. Right now, you look at the field and you say there's no way it can happen. But we've seen a lot of times when somebody in the summer of the off year has a commanding lead in the polls, and then when people actually vote, things change. I mean, in 1971, a lot of people thought Senator Edmund Muskie of Maine was going to be the Democratic nominee, and he fizzled in New Hampshire, and we ended up with George McGovern, and Richard Nixon won handily. We've had other people who did very well early on in the polls who fizzled out. Walter Mondale at this point in 1983 was leading Ronald Reagan in the polls, and Reagan beat him by 17 points in 1984. So a lot can happen. I don't know who that alternative to Trump is right now, but there could be one, and it could happen, emerge over, the late fall, early winter, and then it's a whole new ballgame.
Right. So a lot of coulds, woulds, and shoulds happening when it comes to the dynamics within the Republican Party. Stephen Golub, I want to take this point to you. Given the race for the Republican primary ticket, do you think currently, if you just look at the numbers, it's a race of who can be the vice president under Trump? Because would you be surprised, despite the attacks coming in from Mike Pence and Chris Christie, that they will, put their hands up and say, I didn't mean it. I love this man. He's a great leader. And tomorrow they'll be like, I am for Team Trump. I want to be vice president. I would not be surprised. Lindsey Graham has done it. Chris Christie has done it. Mike Pence has done it so many times. If history repeats itself when it comes to their mindset, when it comes to Trump, I won't be surprised. And will the American people be surprised?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would be surprised. I respect the point you're making, but I would be surprised if Mike Pence or Chris Christie would be offered or would accept the vice presidential nomination just because they're going too far out on a limb, and laudably so, in my view, in attacking Trump. Those very statements they're using to attack him now could be used in a presidential campaign, the general election campaign, by President Biden, by replaying those online or on TV, and that would damage Trump. So for that reason alone, as well as a certain amount of integrity, as hard as it is to maybe give that any credence at this point, I don't see those two accepting the nomination or being offered it. one possibility that would be interesting is Nikki Haley clearly is or seems to be running for vice president, and she may be an attractive running mate for Donald Trump if in fact he secures the nomination, in which case the two vice presidential nominees would be wholly or partly of Indian ancestry, which in terms of the story of immigrants in our country would be inspiring and also might be of interest to a good part of your audience as well.
Right, but even though Indian Americans support the Republicans to hitch a ride with Donald Trump is a completely different story at the end of the day. Nikki Haley has done it, but let's not forget, like, these people who are in the Republican primary race along with Donald Trump, they are primarily state leaders. When you talk about pan-American support, almost none of them have it beyond Ron DeSantis doesn't have a base beyond Florida, Nikki Haley beyond South Carolina. Trump is the only pan-American leader, and he has a rabid fan base in all of their states. If they take on Trump directly, they also jeopardize their own numbers. We've seen what's happened to them whenever they counter Trump. So I feel when it comes to the Indian American card, I think everyone wants to play their level of politics. It really doesn't matter what base you're from, because let's face it, you have a lot of people from a lot of immigrant communities who have also openly supported Trump, not just the African American communities, Latin American communities, even the Indian American community have, openly supported Trump because there is a base that he's been able to tap into. Sanjay, when we talk about Donald Trump and taking on not just the Democrats, but also his contenders in the Republican primary race, everyone's eyes are also on the debate stage. Now, let's say the debate comes. Let's say he's faced with all of these contenders for the Republican primary ticket. Going by his track record, going by his mastery of language, he is likely to eviscerate all of them. I think at the end of the day, the debate stage will look like contenders fighting for his favor to get the vice presidential nomination. And I know you're pointing out the fact that it's still too early, but at the same time, let's call a spade when it comes to the state of the Republican Party right now.
Well, I'm not sure for a start about mastery of language and eviscerating his opposition in a debate. The mastery of language that I have seen has been a mastery of two expressions. One is calling people deranged. The other is calling everything a witch hunt. There's a good deal of repetition, and he has mastered the art of repetition. Whether Donald Trump can argue a point, I doubt very much. Whether he can do this convincingly, I doubt very much. And the reason that he is ahead in the polls is not a result of his debating skills or his mastery of an ability to make a strong argument. There is a certain kind of right wing within the right wing base that he commands, and that has been very loyal to him so far. But I don't think that the debates are necessarily going to strengthen Trump's case. If anything, they could be an occasion where facts and arguments that could be brought by others will remind people exactly what is going on and may begin to raise some doubts among his loyal supporters or compulsively loyal supporters.
Right, and those visuals on your screen, ladies and gentlemen, Trump has landed at Reagan Airport in Washington, D.C., so he's headed towards the courthouse for his arraignment. But once again, he has made the point that if there is the fourth indictment against me, if there are 4 indictments against me, then I have secured the presidency in 2024. Joe Biden will lose because I will be able to play that victim card very effectively. He has done it in the past, ladies and gentlemen, where he was able to take on his contenders whenever it came to the debate stage, be it Republicans, at the same time, be it the Democrats as well. And he has said that the weaponization of the Justice Department is one of his key weapons against Joe Biden. Ray Locker, when it comes to this weaponization of the Justice Department, even when he was president and he was facing all those charges of subverting the Justice Department, this has been an effective tool that has been used by Donald Trump, not just to rally the MAGA base, but also members of the Republican Party. We also remember that at the end of the last general elections, all Republican congressmen, almost all of them, refused to certify the election results. They were willing to buy into the big lie, and many of them still do.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. But there were enough Republicans who stood up to Trump. I mean, 7 Republican senators voted to convict him during his second impeachment. That's unheard of. There are a number of people who look at him and say, no, never again. And those are in his own party. Bear in mind, he has been saying these kind of things since he started running for president. In 2016, before the election was even held, he was claiming that he was going to lose because everything was rigged. This is what Donald Trump does. And he's been doing it effectively. And I think people around the world, yourself included, are stunned that he's not at like 4% in the polls and people haven't thrown him out of the country. I mean, unfortunately, Republicans have joined behind him because they think it's in their political best interest to do so, despite the overwhelming evidence to the contrary. This is a guy who's leading their party to ruin. They know it, but there's enough of a boost in Trump to give them some shred of hope that they can win a presidential election. So they stand behind him, because to challenge him, to say that he's a criminal, means refuting all the things that they have said in the past. And they don't want to do that. That's why people like Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, the senators who voted to impeach him, stand out in the Republican Party, and why they get so much attention, because frankly, everybody in the media in this town is amazed that they have the nerve to do what they're doing. So they get probably outsized attention because of it. But Trump has been saying this forever. That's the way he runs his business. He's been doing it for decades. He's always a victim. He's this great winner, but he's always a victim. I don't know how that works, but he manages to make it work for enough people to get him where he is
and
today.
There he is, the man of the moment, Donald Trump. Sorry to interrupt. Donald Trump there landing at Reagan Airport as he heads to the courthouse for his arraignment. Donald Trump indicted for the third time, but he says that politically he is still strong. He has secured the ticket for the Republican primary fight when it comes to the presidential elections. He is confident that this is a witch hunt as he continues to make that charge against Joe Biden, saying that Joe Biden has weaponized the Justice Department, even saying that he continues to be, as he calls himself, Teflon Don when it comes to the presidential elections, which will kick off in 2024. But Donald Trump there stepping out of his private plane and headed towards the courthouse for his arraignment. He's been indicted for the third time this year alone, ladies and gentlemen. All those charges that were only talked about when Trump was president, now he's paying the price. But will he pay the price politically is the big question. Will he pay the price politically? Will someone from the Republican Party have the nerve to stand up and say, we need to rid ourselves of Donald Trump? Because as we see the fight for the Republican primary ticket, every Republican contender is very squeamish about taking him on. And Joe Biden, who is fighting for re-election, he is only likely to face Donald Trump, a very resurgent and very charged Donald Trump for the 2024 presidential election fight. Stephen Golub, I want to take that point to you. What, in your opinion, Donald Trump, even now, is able to tap into the working class sentiment or the Republican sentiment when it comes to taking on Joe Biden and the Democratic agenda? In your opinion, do you think that, woke politics, as it's talked about in the American media so often, do you think that that only powers voices like Donald Trump, who have taken a stern stand against, things like LGBTQ rights, critical race theory, all these topics which kind of put Democrats in a very tough spot when it comes to talking about, common, brick and mortar issues? Trump takes a very clear stand. Do you think that he's still able to tap into the American polity when it comes to basic issues from jobs to, immigration, all the basic Republican talking points? He's the one who's been able to make that case most effectively against the Democrats.
Well, the general point about Donald Trump's appeal is that it's the politics of resentment. Mm-hmm. He's even told his supporters that I am your retribution. So it's not really based on positive policy positions regarding, even if you disagree with them, policy matters regarding foreign policy or taxes or housing or whatever. It's based on I am your retribution against the supposedly woke populations in the U.S., against coastal elites, as he might put it, against really, this is not so subtle, against minorities, of all sorts, immigrants of all sorts, which even though he doesn't say it explicitly, extends, I'm sorry to say, to people of Indian ancestry because they're not part of his white nationalist base. He really is trying to exploit that and has exploited it to a certain extent. But we get back to the point that when it comes to the general election, even though I think he would have a chance of winning the general election once he's nominated, it won't play as well because it will alienate many more people and will turn the tide against him. If I could add one more consideration to what's going on here, let's remember that once these trials actually start, they may come up with evidence, they may come up with testimony that may be damning to him, either in the Republican primary or in the general election. If there's testimony at trial in May in Florida about how how he undermined national security, that gets lots more publicity than it has been gotten so far about his holding on to documents, even though they endangered national security. Let's take the actual trials and their political impacts into account in the general election, even though they may help him or not hurt him in the primaries.
But at the same time, Stephen, I want to take this point to Sanjay. We are now living in the era where the truth never matters. This is not Watergate, where something like spying on your rivals, gets you impeached as president. So much of these scandals that we're talking about were laid out before Trump got elected, were laid out while he was serving as president. Now he's just, making the rounds of the courts at the end of the day. To see political damage done to his image within the Republican Party is something that is still awaited. I completely agree with you that when it comes to a face-off with the Democrats, that, he has not been a successful president. He has not been a successful flag bearer of the Republican Party. Yet, you have the Republican base firmly behind him because there is no one else who's been able to rally the Republican voters as much as he has. That remains his X factor. How does that change? Because at the same time, you look at the numbers, as Sanjay is pointing out, 37 points ahead of DeSantis. This is only helping him at the end of the day. The victim card is only empowering his position within the Republican Party. And at the same time, given the anti-incumbency that Joe Biden is facing because he's not a very popular president, let's make that very clear. Sanjay, in your opinion, does Trump have a shot of winning 2024 given the anti-incumbency Joe Biden faces and the charge that he has led against the actions of the Justice Department? Do you think in the battle of narratives he can turn things around for the Republican Party in 2024?
Well, a good deal will depend upon what happens between now and then, but certainly that scenario is not impossible because fundamentally he symbolizes a certain, ideology may be too big a word for Trump, as many may see it, but certainly he represents a certain kind of value system and he is the political figure around which those are embodied. And we've seen that kind of politics and that kind of view of the world is supported by no less than the Supreme Court. We've seen their ruling on gun laws, on abortion, recently on education. So there is a kind of politics that gets a good deal of support within the US. The Supreme Court is an expression of that kind of worldview. We've seen many in the Republican Party is supporting it, very much more to the right within the Republican Party than the relative moderates. So it's not impossible. There is a question, though, whether the moral issue will come into play, and that is not something that we should, I think, entirely cynically discount. It is not impossible, and this is more than morality. These are questions here about playing with democracy, and once these facts are surfacing in a reinforced way, people may begin to rethink their positions. Certainly, over the classified documents case, this is somebody who was the president and the commander-in-chief of the armed forces who not only takes classified documents home, but invites people home and shows them to them, shows off these documents to them. How irresponsible or responsible is that? A lot of people will see that when the matter comes to trial.
Right, and those visuals on your screen, ladies and gentlemen, Trump headed towards the Washington court after landing at the Reagan airport. You can see that entire convoy headed towards court as he is set to be arraigned after being indicted for the third time. Ray Locker, let's look at it from a tangible political perspective. Now, under Trump's presidency, he was able to stack the Supreme Court in favor of the Republican Party. He was able to get a lot of conservative judges onto the bench. And now you have things like Roe v. Wade, gun laws. You can see the turn when it comes to those hallmark Republican issues that have gained a lot of traction within American politics. Do you think beyond anything, forget the morality, forget the language, the fact that he's able to rally the Republican base and achieve that political end, what he was able to do with the Supreme Court, is one of the tangible political realities that the Republican Party still has to face when it comes to picking him to lead the party against the Democrats?
Well, he got extremely lucky when he was able to pick 3 Supreme Court justices and get them confirmed, mostly because of the conduct of Mitch McConnell in the Senate, who blocked Merrick Garland from getting a hearing in 2016, and who rushed Amy Coney Barrett through during the final month of the campaign in 2020. That's something that he said he wouldn't do before, and he did it anyway. So Trump got very lucky. But bear in mind, the Roe v. Wade decision is not popular. Abortion rights has the support of the majority of the American people. So this Supreme Court foisted their beliefs on the American people with really kind of questionable legality. And that is continuing to backfire on Republicans around the country. That is not going to help Trump in a general election. He's already trying to backpedal away from the ban on abortion in a huge swath of this country that was caused by the Dobbs decision. And I don't think people are going to buy it. So he was able to achieve a success that is a double-edged sword and is hurting him more than it's helping him.
Right, but at the same time, how many times have we heard that 90% of Americans are in favor of sensible gun laws, but that never becomes a point of rallying against the Republican Party? And at the end of the day, when it comes to the Second Amendment, that's still one of the calling cards of the Republican Party, even though majority of Americans support sensible gun laws. We never see mass shootings or lax gun laws pull down the Republican Party. These are ideological issues which tend to rally the Republican voter base. Stephen Golub, come in on that. When it comes to achieving the ideological ends of the Republican Party, on that note, Trump has been quite successful.
Yes, he has. I would distinguish between the gun issue and the abortion issue, though, in that you're absolutely right. Even though most Americans, the large majority, support gun control in various forms, gun safety in various forms, you've got a core that's so vehemently opposed to it that they influence politics in a lot of states. Abortion is different. Abortion is a visceral issue, of a matter of people's fundamental rights to many women and to many men in this country. So I wouldn't exactly equate it with the gun control issue in terms of political impact, but there are some similarities there that, as Ray very rightly pointed out, weigh in favor of the Democrats. And you see stories again and again in the American media about girls and women having to go through ridiculous hoops or having to endanger their lives because of this new anti-abortion ruling by the Supreme Court, the Dobbs decision, and that will continue to be part of the national dialogue. So guns is one thing, abortion is another, and abortion has already played a big role in the Democrats' favor in elections since then in 2022, and will play a role next year in 2024, without a doubt.
But Stephen, at the same time, you're talking about abortion rights. The base of the evangelicals is something each party covets. They want the evangelical base because they mobilize very effectively when it comes to polling day. Who do you think the evangelicals in America are grateful for when it comes to Roe v. Wade? It's Donald Trump, and he's got their support time and time again.
Well, I don't think two parties are really competing for the evangelicals for the most part, because the evangelicals, for the most part, they're already baked into supporting Trump. What the difference is making with regard to abortion is that people who were in the middle, who supported abortion rights, but otherwise weren't galvanized by it, now are very galvanized by the decision, which goes against decades and decades of jurisprudence. So I don't think that we could simply boil it down to some people will be galvanized on one side by the abortion decision, some on the other. No, this is playing out positively for the Democrats as a moral and as a legal matter.
Right. And Sanjay, I want to take that point to you. So when it comes to the Republican base, we've all discussed about the fact of how the MAGA base, it's a cult-driven base. Trump can do no wrong when it comes to the MAGA supporters. We've heard so many of them, they're QAnon supporters. They think Biden isn't president even now that Trump is actually president, that he controls the military. All those conspiracy theories are floating around when it comes to the MAGA base, and Trump has taken advantage of it very effectively. Let's talk about the Republican moderates. Now, at the same time, if you look at Joe Biden, even though he's a Democrat, he is quite a poster boy for the Republican moderates. Do you think that when it comes to the 2024 presidential elections, the Republican Party is running the risk of alienating the moderates towards Democrats?
Well, very clearly, if it were to come to the elections with Trump leading the Republicans and as their nominee, then there will be questions, and depending upon the issues that are made current at the time, abortion certainly could be a factor that would weigh very heavily in favor of the Democrats, as could other arguments that they put forward against right-wing Republican policies. That clearly is not just possible but likely. But at the moment, we are talking about the kind of support that Trump is drawing from within his own party for the purpose of nomination, which is, of course, a step short of the next step of the elections. To that extent, there is a good deal of support he's getting for his views, and certainly these are views shared by a very large section of traditional Republican voters. They think that Trump is the man for them, that Trump is the man for the views they like, they believe in, and that they would like implemented through government in the United States. So they are backing Trump for that reason. And of course, there is an overlap with the personality cult. They seem to like his tough talk and his tough style, even though everyone does not.
Right. Ray Locker, we're getting those visuals on our screen of Trump arriving at the courthouse now. So his arraignment is set to begin anytime soon. I want to talk about the Trump orbit right now. Rudy Giuliani recently just gave a statement. He has said that this is a witch hunt against Donald Trump. Rudy Giuliani being the infamous lawyer of Donald Trump, who himself admitted in court to lying about the Georgia voter fraud.